By the time that people become aware of the true purpose of the group, they've undergone some sort of extreme persuasion program and therefore no longer are thinking critically, no longer have the wherewithal to extract them from the group.
Lori Ryan.
Vallow, seen in this recently unearthed video, competing for Mrs. Texas in 2004, facing possible extradition to Idaho and criminal charges related to the disappearance of her children last September.
Like, I'm now starting to see that I Mormoned wrong. My brother and I joke about that. He has also left the church in the last year. But we joke about how our sisters seem to be able to Mormon right. There's some flexibility, they can be nuanced, they make it work for them. But we were so black and white and rigid in our thinking, and I was so in this group of righteous obsession.
Now, some have referred to Lori and her new husband, Chad Daybell, as the doomsday couple. Kim Powell's been on this story since the very beginning, and you spoke to an ASU professor who specializes in cults and their kind of practices.
For 2 decades, Chad Daybell wrote books about his near-death experiences, saying he's had spiritual revelations. Family says Lori Vallow started reading his books and attending his seminars years ago. Chad and Lori got married in late 2019, only after their previous spouses both suspiciously passed away. In court paperwork filed 1 year ago, Lori's previous husband, Charles, stated Lori became infatuated and at times obsessed with near-death experiences and spiritual visions. She told Charles she was a god and has lived several lives and is now a translated being sent by God to lead 144,000 chosen people into the new millennium.
When you put a couple of people together with that sort of mindset, it can create a synergy.
Dr. Linda DeMaine has taught a cult and religions class at ASU for 12 years.
When somebody is claiming to be a god, like a deity, or a messenger of a deity, we're going to place great credence in what they have to say, if we're a believer.
She told him that she was a god, she was a translated being, that she was there to save 144,000 people for the second coming of Christ in July 22nd of 2020.
144,000 people. Lori's ex-husband backs that number up in their divorce papers in early 2019.
She brought up all these people that were part of this podcast group that she also was a part of. And when she's describing some of their doctrine and describing some of their beliefs, it was just too much to even get my mind around.
That group is called Preparing a People. Preparing a People hosts workshops, mostly in Idaho and Arizona, filled with speakers who blend parts of the Mormon religion, pseudoscience, and doomsday prepping.
I hope there is justice, and I hope the children are found.
And another twist. A court document alleging Vallow's niece, Melanie Boudreau, knows where Tylee and JJ are, but is refusing to cooperate with police. In the document filed as part of an ongoing custody battle, Melanie's ex-husband, Brandon, seen here in this photo, also alleges Boudreau is involved in a cult where numerous members, adults and children alike, have been being killed off like flies. Police say they searched Boudreau's residence, located right next door to Vallow's home in this Idaho apartment complex back in November as part of their investigation.
Chad, Lori, can you tell me where your kids are?
For months, questions have swirled about Vallow's alleged involvement in her children's disappearance. Police say the 46-year-old lied to them about JJ's whereabouts when they conducted a welfare check last fall, and that she and Daybell left town the next day, fleeing to Hawaii, where she was arrested last Thursday.
Chad Daybell wrote a lot of books, most with the same general concept. The United States will soon collapse, and a chosen few believers will be the ones to save it and put it back together. But Lori Vallow's friends say she took it much farther than that.
The basis seemed to be preparing for the end of times. And they believed that they were part of the 144,000.
And the reason Lori Vallow went to Hawaii was to save her.
They were here to gather the other members to join them. And she had told me that she was there because I was one of the 144,000 and she was there to gather me. And I just said, I think I'm not, I'm just not.
Trent Price says he and Chad Daybell were missionaries together 30 years ago and have stayed in touch over the years.
He was one of the best of us. You know, we were a pretty solid group, but he was amazing.
Price describes Daybell as a gentle giant and someone with a deep sense of spirituality that people were drawn to.
I had a great mission. I just felt like his was extraordinary and like it was one that we all admire.
But things have changed. Price says he can't ignore what's happened over the past couple of months, starting with Tammy Daybell's suspicious death last October to his new wife, Lori Vallow, who's in jail because she won't tell authorities where her 2 missing kids are.
I'm concerned for my friend. I don't know how this is all going to play out.
I mean, imagine what you would do if you had a God speak to you. You know, you would start feeling a little bit empowered, and it looks like that's exactly what happened. It's like, why would you stay in this mess of reality if the next life is better? Just...
Is this issue involved in this case?
I think it is. And that's why I'm really afraid for Lori's kids. I like to think that they're on some kind of compound in a bunker somewhere, hunkered down safe, but it doesn't look that way.
And, but I quickly realized within a matter of weeks that I could not sit in my skin knowing that I was not living up to my covenants. The promises that we make in the temple at baptism, the idea of being a bad Mormon was absolutely unacceptable. And so I ultimately decided and consulted with my husband at the time and with his dad and realized, like, this is the best thing. And so I resigned from the church in March of 2018. My family, my children, all remained members. I'd had a friend, a really good friend, who came over one night about 8 months ago, and we were just chatting. And for whatever reason, I started telling her how into the prepper stuff we were. And I started telling her about what I had experienced in my work environment. And she sat there dumbfounded and told me that I had been in a cult and that none of this stuff was okay. And I didn't believe her.
And this is a Latter-day Saint?
This is an active Latter-day Saint.
And she told you you've been in a cult?
She told me I was in a cult. And she told me that this was abuse and that it wasn't okay. And I remember sitting there and like, okay, I hear the words you're saying. I'm not gonna internalize them because I don't know what to do with them. And that just seems crazy. I was just super faithful. So when I saw that day, I freaked because it meant that she was right.
Why did you decide to talk publicly about this?
I feel an enormous amount of shame for staying in a dysfunctional environment with gaslighting and manipulation. And I guess this is a good time to say, I know that there are people that the church is an absolutely wonderful part of their life, that it is a great piece of their fantastic personality and the service that they do. My children are still members of the church. My parents are still members of the church. So I share this very aware of the possibility that it can hurt others' feelings, but it was for me in my life.
So you not only have to, in a way, leave this group, but leave the church.
Yes.
But at the time, you're thinking it's all the same.
I'm thinking it's all the same, and I don't even see how work and the marriage are all connected with it. So at first I was just going to go inactive for a little bit so that I could focus on this part and not try to piece together or untangle the confusion that had come up with my faith. Faith crisis is what we often call it.
And also in the divorce papers between Charles and Lori, Charles claimed that Lori said if she got in the way of her preparing for the chosen people for the end of the world, she would kill him. Now, we want to be clear, she is not facing any charges for his death. Now, even given all of the death and the 2 missing children in this case, there are still people in online forums sticking up for Chad and Lori, saying this is all a big misunderstanding and soon the truth will come out. Chris?
It will be interesting to hear what that truth is. And I would agree that what happened to Adam and Eve was pride, but it's the kind of pride that Satan specializes in. It's not your standard run-of-the-mill garden variety pride that merely thinks it's better than everyone else. No, this pride is far more egregious in the eyes of God. It is the ultimate pride. Pride, it is its worst expression. It's called self-deification. Self-deification. It's the worship of self. It's sitting down and saying, I am the center of the universe. We might call it narcissistic or sociopathic behavior and all the rest, which it certainly can be. But even people with lesser degrees of narcissism have lived in this idea that it's all about me and it's all about taking care of me. This is the true and original sin, and it didn't begin in the Garden of Eden. In fact, according to Jesus, it started in heaven. But we find that this sin that really became the foundation of Lucifer's downfall is exactly the same technique he used with Adam and Eve. In chapter 3, he says to Eve, in the day you eat of this forbidden fruit, your eyes will be opened, and what? You will be like God. Now, as crazy as that is, Adam and Eve, who walked with the voice of God in the garden in the cool of the day, must have understood that God was so much more than they were, and yet there's this pervert desire within us to want to ascend to a place of exaltation.
It's crazy.
References to numerous lives on different planets, believing she was a god, and death threats.
I said, oh, Charles, are you sure you're not making this up? He said, I can't make this up.
People saying, I'm being attacked by the devil. Let me tell you, I'm not saying that never happens, but what I will tell you is this. His most powerful weapon is the thoughts, the ideas he puts into your brain. I think that it was probably expressed best by A.W. Tozer many years when he wrote in one of his books, he says, people think of the world not as a battleground, but as a playground. He says, we are not here to fight, we're here to frolic. The worship growing out of such a view itself has become a sort of sanctified nightclub without champagne. You can see how dated it is because a lot of churches now actually include the champagne. So it's not such a crazy thing, but it realizes that people see their life primarily through the lens of the moment they're in without any greater long-term view, especially eternal view.
But thoughts started coming to my mind, and he would answer my thoughts. And Psalms 139:2 says he answers our thoughts afar off. I thought, Lord, why'd you send me to this horrible place? He said, because many people do not believe hell exists. He said, even some of my own people do not believe hell is real. Now that statement surprised me because I thought all Christians believe in hell. But I found out since many Christians don't believe in hell. They say, Bill, God's a loving God. There's nobody in hell suffering. They believe in annihilationism, which I explained to you, or universalism, which is a false teaching that's going around saying that everybody gets saved. Or soul sleep, that you just fall asleep. That's not true. Hell is real, it's permanent, it's eternal, and God doesn't want one person to go there. That's why he died on the cross, was to keep us out. I thought, Lord, why did those demons hate me so much? He said, because you're made in my image and they hate me. See, John 15:18, Jesus said they hated me before they hated you. That's why Jesus said in John 10:10, the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. But he said, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. You see, so the evil we see in life, the destruction, comes from the demonic realm, not from God. We serve a good and a loving God. He came to give us life. So when you see sickness and disease and poverty and all that, that all comes from the demonic realm. That's not from God. People falsely accuse God, blame him for all kinds of things. They get angry with God when they see someone get sick and die. They think it's God's fault. No, that was the devil's fault. He's the one that caused the sickness, not God. But you still might not be convinced. You might be like a radio talk show host that I was on with across America. A lot of people are still not convinced with the good. They still have trouble with thinking, man, I'm a good person. How can God let me suffer in hell? Or let someone that is a good person, takes care of their family? Well, let me explain something. Besides you not being good enough, none of us are, this analogy might help you. I was on this radio show and he says, Don't you quote me one Bible verse over my airwaves, Christian. You got that? No Bible verses. I said, okay, no problem. He said, I submit to you that your God is unreasonable because he doesn't consider my viewpoint. I'm a good person, and my viewpoint is just as valid as yours, and if your God doesn't let me into heaven, he's actually guilty of a hate crime. And your God should be arrested and thrown in jail. That's what I think of your God. So what do you got to say for yourself, Christian? Well, what do you say? You're live. And God gave me an analogy. Thank God. I said, okay, you think you need to be a good person. Let me explain. I said, say you went and found the most expensive home in the country and you knocked on their door. And you said, excuse me, I'm moving in with you because I'm a good person. What do you think the people would say? No, right? They don't know you. You have no relationship with them. Well, the same way, I said, you go through your whole life. You have nothing to do with God. You deny Jesus as the Son of God, which he said is the only way to his house. Then at the end of your life, you come and knock on his door, demand to live there because you're a good person. What does good have to do with it? You don't know him. You have no relationship with him. You might say, Bill, come on, I'm a good person. I'm not going to go to this horrible place. How can a loving God let a good person go to hell? But let me explain something. You might be pretty good compared to people. But if you're going to go by that standard, you want God to judge you whether you were good enough, then he'll go by that standard. But see, his standard is different than yours and mine. His standard is perfect. See, James 2:10 says, if we offend his law in one point, we're guilty of all. If we lie once, Revelation 21:8 says that all liars shall have their part in the lake of fire. If we steal one thing, 1 Corinthians 6:9 says, no thief will inherit heaven. If we have one lustful thought, Jesus said in Matthew 5, that's the same as committing adultery. No adulterer will inherit heaven. One lustful thought, just one. And Proverbs 24:9 says, even the thought of foolishness is a sin. If we have one foolish thought our whole life, that would exclude us from heaven. That's a pretty high standard, isn't it? So none of us can stand before a holy God and say, hey, I'm pretty good, let me in. He's going to say, no, not according to my standard, you're not good. Matter of fact, Job 15:16 says, man is so filthy, he drinks iniquity like water. So in God's sight, we are filthy rags. Thank God it's not based on being good. Because not one of us would be there. It's based on a relationship with Jesus Christ. But see, our sin is punishable by death. Right? We sin. We all sin in life. That deserves punishment. And the Bible says it's deserving of death. But Jesus paid that price for us on the cross. He died in our place. So we wouldn't have to take the punishment. He would say them weeping. But because he loves man, he gives us that free will to choose. He doesn't force you into anything. Do you believe his word or don't you? It's up to you. So my question for you is, do you know if your name is written in his book? You have to be certain of this one, people. Please don't make a mistake with this. Because your soul is eternal, whether you believe it or not, you will spend your eternity in one place or the other. And you're going to hear next week about heaven. You much rather spend it there than hell.